Hello BookTube, I'm back wearing a discussion hat. I didn't wear it in my last discussion, but I've decided now that it's the discussion hat. So let's have a discussion. This particular discussion is brought to you courtesy of Curtis Books and Film, who is a fantastic booktuber who has just hit over 100 subscribers. He started like 3 weeks ago. The dude is killing it on BookTube. Check out his original video. It's linked in the description below. I wish him all the best with his channel. I genuinely mean that because I've really enjoyed watching all his videos and having little chats with him in the comments. It's really good to see that sort of thoughtful, calm guy make it at least to 100 subscribers on YouTube. Hopefully I'll be joining him there in the 100 club soon. Maybe he's too good for me now. Maybe he'll never see this video. Oh well. So, what's the discussion about today? Today, the discussion is about how fiction can make us smarter, more intelligent, taking a pill for intelligence, and that pill is called books. Book smarts. You may have heard of it on the streets. It's different from street smarts. I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's just talk about books, shall we? So, for his video, Curtis began by talking about how he was reading a book and a factoid caught in his mind. I can't remember right now what the factoid was, but it was a factoid. I believe it was about a museum. And then he went to a pub quiz and the factoid came up. And he realised that reading this book had taught him something he'd never known before. And it had stuck in his mind. And that is the first way that reading books can make us smarter, is by teaching us these little factoids, these little things that you might not have known before. I had a similar experience when I was 14 years old in a geography lesson at school. There was a question on the test, and I'll always remember this. There was a question on the test and it said, what is the name of a body of sand that can be blown about by desert winds? I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that's not a normal question. And then I remembered, like, there was a part in a book I was reading. I can't remember the book of all the things. There was a book I was reading, and the characters were lost in a desert, and one of them said, "Oh, that sand dune wasn't there before," and I thought, "Oh shit, a sand dune. That if it wasn't there before, it means it must have moved." So I guessed it was sand dune, and I was correct, and then I realised that I'd learned things also from books. And he's absolutely correct in this point. Reading more books will expose you to more little things like that, because authors are famous for loading their works with things they know about. It's a famous phrase, in fact, write what you know. It's Herman Melville, I believe, is the writer of Moby Dick. If I'm wrong about that, fucking kill me in the comments, whatever. But the guy who wrote Moby Dick, Herman Melville, I'm going with Herman Melville, he was like mega into the whaling industry and like sailing and shit. So if you read Moby Dick, you will learn more than you ever wanted to know about whaling and all of that kind of stuff. And that's really fascinating. And that is something that fiction can do, because you're not going to go out in your day-to-day life and think, oh, do you know what I want to do today? I want to learn about whales. Not the country attached to England, but the whales, the big sea creatures. You're not really going to do that. It might not even cross your mind. It's exposing you to these sorts of new ideas. So that's the one way, that's the best way, I think, literature directly impacts your IQ. But I think, and Curtis goes into this in detail later on, that books actually have a fundamental role in shaping who you can become as a person right from the get-go, even before you can read. And that may sound really daft, but it's true. Think about where all of the sort of early life lessons you learned were from. Like, your parents will say things to you when you're a kid, like you should share things with others, you shouldn't cry wolf, all of that kind of stuff. Where do those values come from? Well, I'll show you, because I have them all here. This is the collected works of the Brothers Grimm, if you cannot read the cursive font. These are fairy tales. These are for babies, you know. Little babies get read this stuff when they're children to teach them about life. All of these little stories are designed in a way that is easy to digest for a person who doesn't understand the world and who doesn't have a real context for things, and it teaches them valuable moral life lessons. Aesop's fables are another good example with the tortoise and the hare. Like, it teaches you very early on not to be complacent in your abilities, and there's always someone who will do the job better than you, like slow and steady, that kind of thing. Determination. That these are all things that you learn from fiction, and like there's no non-fiction book that is going to teach you about the benefits of determination and hard work and effort, as well as the tortoise and the hare, or the story like the ant and the grasshopper, where the grasshopper's a lazy son of a bitch and he dies in the winter because the ant seizes all the means of production for himself and he gets fat. So like there's no non-fiction book that's going to tell you that. And as a kid, how are you going to learn about like the value of hard work before it's too late? Like, if you never learned from fiction, you'd get to your adult life and you'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do. I've never worked hard ever because I didn't think it was important. Like, of course, fiction, that's where it starts. And then as you get a little bit older, you start learning more complex things, you know? Like, look at this, for example. This is a book for children. It's a children's story. The Series of Unfortunate Events, it's called, The Bad Beginning. It's a book for children. You may have heard of it. Now, this is about people whose parents die, and then they have to fight off a sinister man with poor facial hair hygiene. And like that goes on for ages. But the moral of the book is like standing up for your friends, like being loyal to each other. It's about learning, it's about inventiveness, creativity, and these are things that you learn from the characters in your favourite books as you're a child, and they're growing, and as your worldview expands and you incorporate the experiences of your friends and like yourself in these things, you can relate them to the characters, and you think back and you think, oh man, like this is just like that point in that book. And something I learned very, very recently, actually in the last few days, and I'm so glad I came across this quote. I've got the sayer of the quote in this little piece of paper here. I need to find the page. Here we go. It's a quote from a guy called John Dewey. I don't know who John Dewey is or what he does. I might look it up at some point because he seems quite smart. His quote is, "We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience." Now that is a mega quote in my opinion, because he's absolutely right. We don't learn things just by going through them and experiencing them. We learn things from having experiences and then thinking about them and ruminating on them, relating them to ourselves, carrying those lessons into the future. And what books are so good at doing, and what fiction is so good at doing, is giving you a broader experience than you might ever possibly have. Especially with things like the Series of Unfortunate Events. Like my parents aren't rich. They could die in a fire, but they're not rich. So I'll never learn what it's like to be a poor orphan. But I can think on hard times, like, how do you react to hard times? I could curl up into a ball and just cry myself to sleep, or I could get determined and try and fight my corner like Klaus and Violet and Sonny Baudelaire. And then when you grow up even more, you have even more experiences. And you're a teenager and everything's awkward and you don't know what to do and you've never experienced this before. And then you come across young adult books and you come across things like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. And then you realise, like, oh man, like, these are experiences that other people have gone through. This is where you start developing empathy. And you can develop empathy through books as well as your real life. Like, I had a friend that died of cancer around the same age that these characters were in this book. And I could relate that experience to this book, but had I never experienced that, I would have been like, oh man, like, this kid's going through like a hard time, like things aren't good for him, like, But how does he react? What does he learn? And you can learn things from books in that way. And fiction's so good at that. Like, giving you an experience and then letting you ruminate on it. And that is why one of the things I always go on in reviews on what I judge a book's quality on is the pacing. And it's always been very hard for me to quantify why I think pacing is so important in books, because it's a very qualitative thing. You can't say like, oh, I'm docking points because there's typos. Like, that's a very, you can look at a book and say that objectively. Pacing is so different, because the best books, in my opinion, are paced out so that when it teaches you something, it gives you that space to think about it and to learn from it deeply. Like in The Martian, for example, like there's a moment in there, I'm not going to do spoilers, but there's a moment in there where the character suffers a major setback. And then for a little while afterwards, like not a lot happens in the book, because now you're thinking about what it takes for him to survive that. How's he going to get over it? And you're thinking, like, how does this relate to my life? If you just had plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point, after a big event that changes the tone of the story, you don't have time to think about it and ruminate on it. And that's, I think, that actually does go back to one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of young adult books as much these days, because they are very focused on grabbing your attention and pulling you through. Bang, 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 bang. It doesn't give you a lot of time to really think and ruminate on things like adult books often do. The last thing, obviously, you learn when you're an adult, and then you get to adult literature, and then you start experiencing, you start being confronted. Like all of these books, like these books going from when you're a little babby, up to when you're a teenager, like an older teenager, they are going to help you build up a worldview, and that will make you an intelligent person who has opinions about things, knows what they're coming from, because they've got experiences that they've reflected on and ruminated on. They can relate their life to things, and so they've developed themselves as a person. But what creates a better person and a more intelligent person as you grow up is conflict with that image that you built for yourself. Now, this is why I think it's very important, especially as an adult, to read books that you vehemently disagree with. Books that you think, like other people might say, this is a problematic book because it's promoting a worldview that they don't agree with. And they think that that is bad and should be eradicated. I think that's a very incorrect stance to take. Because if you don't allow yourself to be confronted and have your opinions and views challenged, you can never solidify them. Like, you're just saying, this is what I believe. But you're just saying you believe it. You've never really had to defend it. And I think old, like, adult books will have you confront that worldview. Like, I'll give this book as an example. It's called One Day. It's by David Nichols. Yes, David Nichols. That's one of my like favourite books that I've read in the last few years. Absolutely, maybe one of my all-time favourites, because it challenges this idea that you get from young adult books like this, that love is a thing that happens so naturally and so instantly. It challenges that view, and it reveals, possibly for the first time, like if you've been in a relationship that's been smooth sailing, like maybe you don't have the experience of a relationship that has ups and downs and turmoil, and this is sort of challenging your worldview and making you understand that what you experience is not the same as everyone else. And that's a very, very powerful thing, and I think fiction absolutely has the power to do that, in absolutely every respect in your life. Like, no matter if it's a personally held belief, or if it's like a political opinion. Like, I read Starship Troopers, not Stormship Troopers, that'd be a very different book, probably, might be the same. But Starship Troopers, the ideology behind it is something that I massively oppose. Absolutely don't disagree with it 100%. Like, it's essentially a fascist society that's masquerading itself as a utopia and brainwashing children. That's what I took away from that book, because I have developed over the years, like a more liberal worldview, I saw that, and my instant reaction was to go, like, this guy's full of shit, what he's saying. But because I'm a grown-up that doesn't mind having my ideas challenged, I was able to say, like, I understand, I see where you're coming from, I get what you're trying to do, and I really love the way you've presented it, because the setting, all that's great, the writing's great, but the ideas I disagree with, and here's like how I disagree with them. And some of the ideas I was saying, you know what, maybe, yeah, I didn't think about it that way. And that's made me grow as a person and learn. And that is a brilliant thing that fiction can do. Because when you talk to real people in real life about things that you disagree with them with, you tend to find yourself in an argument. But you can't get into a two-way argument with a book, as far as I'm aware. So that is basically my thoughts on how books, from when you're a little baby that can't move his little head around without it falling off, to when you're an old man who can't move his wrinkly head around without it falling off. That's how books can make you grow and become more intelligent. And I have had so much fun now doing this discussion for the last 16 minutes, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Thank you to Curtis for creating this discussion, the original discussion, and providing an opportunity for me to respond. I don't want people to think that I'm just like tailcoating off of now more successful booktubers with me doing these responses, because I've done a few response discussion videos now, but I think this is how you get a dialogue going, guys. Like, I don't want to keep it confined to the comments section. I want to make videos in response. I want to share my opinion, and that's what BookTube's for, isn't it? I'll probably, maybe I might do some more interesting, unique discussion videos soon. I don't know. But this one was great. So thank you again, Curtis. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.